All right, testing, testing. Hope you guys can see me and hear me. Let me know in the chats if you can. Hope you're all doing well. Let's see here. Sure, there we go. So, over the last couple years, I've been on kind of this 5-year weight loss journey, and I've lost 57 pounds. And for about 3 years or so, let's turn this. It's bothering me. There we go. Yeah, right here. Sorry, just trying to figure this out here. For the past 3 years or so, I've been able to keep the weight off. And through the process of that, that's really been where I believe I've cracked the code for myself, because I've been able to hold it off for 3 years. And I've noticed that that is something that seems to be missing is you find people who lose the weight, but including myself, because I've been down this rodeo at least 5 times. But keeping it off, that's a whole nother ball game. And what I notice is there's so much how-to out there, but the things that's neglected, and I wanted to cover both sides of the equation because to me, it's the missing piece. And the two sides is you have the how-to, and then you have the mindset. The mindset is what's going to keep you going. You have to, while you're doing the how-tos, you actually have to change how you think. And if you haven't transitioned and been prepared and built a foundation when you lose all the weight, the chances of keeping it off, in my opinion, long term, from my own experience, is pretty much slim to none. Because it's really about habits, it's about mindset and becoming and doing together what needs to be done to keep it off. And so a lot of people get excited, they have a lot of momentum, but the question is, what do you do when the momentum goes away? And as of today, I've walked 737 days straight of at least 10,000 steps or more. And that has done so much. I'm not going to say that that's the secret. The secret to me is the mindset. That's the secret. Because there's so many ways to get the weight off. But the question is, can you keep it off? That is the rarity that I noticed. And especially as I get older, because I'm almost 41, there's less you can do as you get older. Your body is a lot less forgiving with the foods, with recovery, things of that nature. Now, I feel 28, to be honest, in so many ways, but I can't eat like I used to as a teenager. It's just different as I get older. But I just want to answer questions. I want to be able to help as many people as possible. I put together a course also, so you can find it in the description down below. But I wanted to cover both sides because I think there's this neglect of the mindset part. It's not sexy. That's where the hard work is. I think, yeah, the activities and the how-tos are hard work, but changing into a completely different person and actually pulling that off, that to me is the toughest work. And I did a post yesterday on Threads about, in my opinion, I think keeping the weight off is more difficult than actually losing it. But it takes time to understand at a core level how to actually do it and how to be successful with it. Check this here. Got multiple things going here. So there's this girl that I recently saw on Instagram, and she's gone about a year and a half, and I believe she's lost, what is it, like 80 pounds or so. And the big thing, and it's kind of a unique situation, is all the GLP-1s. and she's doing it all natural. And I think that that takes a ton of work. I think that that, and I told her, I made a comment on it. I said that when you're getting through this, when you come out on the other side, the amazing thing about her is she's going to understand the entire process. She's going to be able to understand what it takes to not only do it the natural way, but she's going to be able to have a greater understanding from the inside out what it takes, what she did, how much work it takes, and she's going to be able to have a level of confidence that shortcutting your process won't give you. You know, a lot of people, they just want to change clothes. They want to cover everything up. But the problem is everybody knows internally whether they're legitimate or not. They know internally whether they have the confidence because it exudes from the inside out. For instance, probably the thing in my entire journey that I would recommend for people to start, obviously the food thing is one that's very important. And as far as I do believe you probably heard the comments of abs are made in the kitchen and weight loss is 80% or 85% diet. That is so true, especially as I get older. I think that that is the missing part. You know, I eat the same meal every day, at least 90% of the time, granted, if I have it. And that's, ground beef and eggs, salt, butter, an avocado if I have one. But being able to stick with the same meals, I'm not saying I won't do other things, but I cut out pretty much 95% of food altogether for the most part. Now I have a couple things that I go nuts on once in a while, and I still struggle with binge eating from time to time. But I've done the process long enough for a long enough period of time where you get to see patterns, and I've been tracking. I have a whole section where I'm tracking basically the last 5 years, and it's graphed. And the reason I do that and the reason I recommend people doing that is because it gives you a story that you can refer back, and throughout that graph, I can look at different things and different struggles and different spikes or dips and understand what was going on in my life to be able to remember what was going on, understand the feelings, and be able to change the future with it. So I think when I talk about mental, there's one thing that is important to note is that when you're feeling a certain way and you're able to, when you're starting to feel it and you're starting to go for the food, and you can catch yourself and you can throw a stop sign up front and say, hold on, what am I feeling? What do I want to eat and why? Is it for comfort? Is it because I'm hungry? What is the situation that would cause me to do it? And all I'm saying with that is that you have to have this self-awareness that allows you to put a stop to things before it unravels, before you completely flip out. It's one thing to have like a binge meal. It's another thing to binge for 5 days, you know? But I think that we don't attack the entire process from all the angles that are necessary, which is the reason, in my opinion, that people don't get the long-term weight loss. Again, I personally think weight loss, that part of the journey is tough, but I think keeping it off is next level. And to understand how to change to actually make it work is next level. Because when you're doing the whole calorie deficit and you're losing the weight, you you know what you need to do because you're getting the repetitions in, but all of a sudden you hit this wall when you get to the weight loss the weight that you're wanting to be at, then what? Now I basically have three sections. You have the weight loss, you have kind of coming into landing, and then keeping it off. The second portion, when you're starting to level off, you're having to kind of reintegrate and get your calories back up again, because you can't just be in a deficit forever. You're going to have to pivot, and that pivot, in my opinion, is actually really difficult, especially if you've been on the road for a long time. See, for me, it took me 3 years to get to the weight that I needed to be at. I had a situation in the middle where I had a massive spike, had a traumatic event, and it took me an entire year to recover to the weight that I was at that moment. So there's an entire year of being derailed. So it could be a lot faster. My goal would be to help people do what took me 3 years, do it in months, depending on, how much weight you need to lose. And when I was really going, my average is about 1.6 pounds per week. So I don't think that's extreme. I don't think that's undoable for most people. I think that's very reasonable, and it's not excessive. There's a couple levers that I pull per day. One of the things is that I do that is a non-negotiable for me is I get my steps in. And the reason, it's not just about the weight loss. I think personally it helps me to have it helps. I look at it as maintenance, but I look at it as movement and confidence building. See, for me, walking 737 steps in a row of at least 10,000 steps or more, when I think about that, what else does that say? Well, that says that I wasn't sick enough ever in that time frame to not get it in. I wasn't injured enough to not get it in. And there's times that I limped. There's times where I was in pain. And, I had a guy comment, he's like, well, that's good. Well, I have these pains and stuff. It's like, yeah, me too. My joints hurt. My legs hurt. My whole body hurts too sometimes. And I do it anyway. And the thing is the consistency. The reason I like steps is because steps is one of the most simple, tiny wins that you can stack every single day. And the thing is that builds confidence, not just about the weight loss. It's confidence in you being consistent every day, no matter what, rain or shine, and continuing to go. So now it depends on where you live, because different places, you're not going to have the perfect weather in most places. Where I live in more of the South, so it can be hot. Well, I got to get my steps in. For me, I'm up at 5 a.m. every day. So it takes me about an hour and a half. Here's a question. Actually, let me answer this. It's a loaded question. I'm not a fan. I could have been somebody to take one of those products, those medications. Now, I don't want to poo-poo it, because I do know there's some use cases. I think it's overprescribed. I think that, if at all possible, I think natural is the way to go. Of course, that's just my opinion. I'm not a professional, but my message would be, for the most part, would be against that for most people. I just think that's like, here, take a pill, take a shot. I believe in building confidence from the inside out. And again, everyone's different, and I'm not here to put anyone down to take one of those kind of things. I just think that if there's other options, and people are like, everything has a trade-off. So if you go natural, like I said, my whole journey, it took me 3 years to lose the 57 pounds, and I've kept it off for 3 years. So I think that's important, because there are trade-offs. And the thing that people need to ask, because I'm a cancer survivor too. I've had cancer. It'll be 18 years in September. So for me, it's important that I have to look at the trade-offs because that's all it is. Everything is about trade-offs. So the way I see it is what are the long this is the concern with that. What are the long-term consequences of taking those type of those medications? What's the long-term potentials? I'm not here to say they're bad. I'm not here to say, all that because again, there's some use cases for some of them. I just think that it's overprescribed, and I think people look at it as a just a way to kind of cheat it. And I think that you for some people it's tougher to lose weight than others. Sure, maybe hormones. Sure, I believe that there's a difference between men and women when it comes to weight loss. But don't tell me you cannot change your habits and make some better choices, even slowly, and not make progress. And my whole thing is, I don't want to hammer this too much. I know I probably answered the question, but I just think we're way too overprescribed on things, and people want the shortcuts without doing the work. And when you don't do the work, you don't build the internal confidence that you need for the long term. My whole thing is I'm like I've lost 30 pounds at least 4 times, and I've lost 50 twice. And to me, I'm at the last resort. It's like I can't do it again. I don't want to do it again. My body's tired of it, and I don't want to do it again. So I have to be a completely different person and change everything by the time I'm where I'm at. Because weight loss, while you're in the losing the weight era, you have a plan. You can just stick to the plan and ride it all the way to the bottom. The question is, once you get to the bottom, then what? Once you get to your weight loss goal, once you hit the weight you want to be at, then what? For me, I look at it as I like to have a window. So a window for me would be between 160 to 175. I'm okay staying within that. I prefer the mid 160s. I weighed in today, I was 166. I think that people have a hard time, and this is something I learned early, is that you also have to ask what is enough, because things like this can be so consuming. And if possible, I want to do the least amount of work possible. I want to be as lazy as possible to get the results that I want and to be satisfied with that. Because the whole thing with the looks maxing thing is it's just gotten out of control. It's gotten ridiculous. And I think that I want people to be able to have the confidence inside their own skin because they know they did the work. And it's not, here's a great example. I can be confident within myself just by looking at an old picture. I can get a spike, so to speak, of confidence dropped on me by looking at my old picture. I don't look at anyone else. I don't look at, hey, look at me compared to him, even in comparison whatsoever. Because if you do that, if you keep looking outward, you have this always chasing mindset and you're never satisfied, which means you're just in this nonstop, nothing is good enough. And I think it's really important for when people are on the journey that they get crystal clear with what's their goal and what are they satisfied with. And I'm not saying that there's not areas of my life and the things that I'm learning that I can't, improve a little bit. But if I never change past where I'm at right now, I'm content and I'm happy. I'm satisfied. I've developed skills way beyond the weight loss, the consistency, the confidence by doing the work. And I could stand on that. I know that I woke up every single day for 737 days and walked at least 10,000 steps or more straight without missing one day. So I'm coming up on 2 years. And that matters to me, but it's beyond the weight loss. It's that I'm learning the consistency. I'm learning to have confidence in stacking these tiny wins. And I think it's so fitting to to do it one step at a time. And when you do that every day, you stack these little wins and you just build your win bank account, and that builds confidence. And I think that that's been really helpful for me. Probably the biggest lever, because when I walk, it's almost like a time where you can think, you're getting movement in, you're accomplishing a specific goal, which is that's a non-negotiable for me. And I just think there's too much cutting corners and looking for different things, regarding, medications and same things like that. But again, I know everyone's on a case by case basis, so I'm not going to poo poo that. That's a good weight loss, 180 to 130. Yeah, good job. Congratulations on that. I didn't really have if you're under 30, all I'm going to say is do the best you can to get your body and your health in order. I had cancer when I was 22 years old. So I have a couple things that I have to consider even on a daily basis that whether it's managing anxiety, thinking I'm dying every single day, or I feel something like, oh no, is it back? I have these different things. So for me, keeping the weight off and doing the things that I can, not perfectly, but just making some conscious decisions, I feel I don't have a choice. And if you've lost substantial amount of weight like I did for, 5 different times, it gets really tiring to be on the weight loss, you know, cycle constantly. No wonder people wear out. And if they focused more on the mindset and become a different person through the process, they're going to have an easier time figuring out what works for them for the long term. Yeah, this is the first time doing it today. So, position, I don't know, but I will say sleep is very, very, very important. I think that's something that's neglected. Lately, I haven't been sleeping that well, to be honest with you. But during my weight loss, that was priority. So if you were to say, what are the top things to think about? I would say sleep needs to be up there because it has to do with your hormones. It has to do with you making good decisions. Because if you're struggling and you're on fumes, it's hard. It's easy to make big mistakes. But I want people to understand that it doesn't matter if it takes you months. It doesn't matter if it takes you years. I can tell you it took me 3 years to drop 57 pounds because I had to figure it out. But I know that I know that I know that I know that I cracked the code for me. And I've kept it off for 3 years, unheard of in my life as an adult. So, and I'm turning 40 next month. So I think it's important that you have to really dial in. And I could tell you, I'm upset with myself that I was not, I would say since I was 20 or so, now we'll say maybe 20, 22 and on till now, I've lived my life basically in thirds. A third of the time I've been, good weight, decent weight, pretty fit for the most part, for me. And then another third, I was a little overweight, not extreme, but just kind of, more than I should be. And then another third was, too heavy, way too heavy, obese. And the thing that people need to understand is that some of the pains in the joints, whatever, my body's probably not happy that I was carrying 30, 40, 50 pounds around on a daily basis on my knees, on my joints, moving around. And you will pay for it in some way. That stuff catches up to you and it wears you down. And it could still be hanging around. And that's, back to GLP-1 stuff. My concern is, do people think and question what is the long-term consequences of these? Not saying right or wrong, not saying good or bad. I'm just saying there's trade-offs. So if they were to do that and you lose the weight, what are the potential things that what's it doing to you, to your body long term? What is, for instance, I have to consider when I go throughout my day. You can't control everything. I can't prevent cancer. I know there's things that you could try to mitigate certain things, but there's not 100% guarantees that I can't get it again. However, I can make certain choices and at least focus on my health. In my opinion, I don't have a choice. I've used a lot of time wasting and used a lot of time making bad decisions that I want to course correct. And one of the ways to do it is to make sure that I'm consistent and I prioritize my health, not obsess. And I just think that it's about trade offs. It's about focusing on some specific things that I could do and getting my mindset in check and my actions in check, and just making sure that my habits and my lifestyle overall feeds the direction that I want to go. Because I don't know. I don't know. When I lost weight, a lot of weight the first time, of course I didn't keep it off. You start appreciating, as someone who wasn't overweight until I was in my 20s after college. And then you have a lot of suffering and pain throughout your life. All of those traumas accumulate. And it just eventually, I think it's just going to take over if you don't deal with it and make some changes and work through certain things. And the thing is, a lot of people want to neglect the mind. They want to neglect their their feelings and their traumas and their triggers and all that. And I can't tell you, if you can get to the point where you start feeling a certain way and then you see the cupcake and you start reaching for the cupcake, and then all of a sudden you throw a stop sign and be like, wait a minute, I've been down this road. I've done this and I don't like where this goes. Doesn't mean you win every time, but if you can have the self-awareness that if you eat this, and I don't want to be extreme here, I'm just saying just to be mindful of these kind of things, because this is where the victory is at. It's in the mindset. It's the understanding and the self-awareness of what you're actually doing. And a lot of people, including myself in so many ways in life, you mindlessly go through life. And then after a certain amount of time, you get to a place you're like, how did I get here? Well, it's all those different choices accumulated. For instance, with the walking, I think that I don't think something really magical happens if I get 10,000 steps in. But I just saw a guy, he just crossed 124 days straight of 10,000 steps per day. And I'm like, yes, yes. Because you're stacking wins and you're creating habits that it may not be a lot. Let me put it this way. If you look at weight loss, instead of a rush, but you just do it bit by bit, one step at a time, one good choice at a time, over a long period of time, whether that's months, it could be maybe a few years. I can tell you, if you stake the course, it will be 100% worth it, even though it may have taken you a lot longer than other people you see on YouTube. Like, there's people that have these crazy weight loss stories, and it's like you compare yourself to other people and you can fall into that. And my encouragement is that you only compare yourself to your older self. If you can get a little progress, snap a picture, and then go look at an old picture, you just instantly created a little bit of confidence into your deposit, because you know that you are better than you were. It has nothing to do with anyone else. It has nothing to do with anybody other than you, because we're all built different. We all have different needs. We all have different, personalities. We all have, like, my diet is pretty. I stick really. Um, I'm pretty strict in a certain way, but I leave room for some big mistakes. I leave a long runway for big mistakes. So I'll give you an example. I One of the things that helped me, for some of you that are like, okay, is there one little lever that I can pull? Yeah, if you one thing that I can remember is when I gave up sugar, it takes after like day 5, your palate starts changing. Now all of a sudden the food that you used to eat, it's not as attractive anymore. And if you can get through the initial part, again, I'm not saying for everyone. This is just not what I noticed was giving up sugar. I My biggest success, if you're asking what's the best diet for me personally, I think more of a keto diet was where I really got a lot of success because it has a little bit of wiggle room. I know some people really like carnivore, and I think that's fantastic from a short perspective. Sustainable, I know people do it for years. I'm not interested in that for years, but as an elimination diet, perhaps that might be one of the best. But keto gives a little bit more flexibility, and I like that. So low carb, lower carb. Now some will say under 20 grams. No, but under 50 grams, yeah, I was able to do that the times I wasn't binging. And I think it's really important that you just do and find what works for you. So for instance, with YouTube, there's all these people out there. There's trainers, there's doctors, there's um, nutritionists. There's a lot of great information out there. But what I did was I have a group of people that I followed, and I just kind of take, hey, let's try that, or let's do that. Doesn't work. But what you'll notice is that the interesting thing with experts is that none of them agree, and they change their mind. The only thing they have going for them is they are considered an expert. But in reality, one expert and another, they have totally different answers, and they'd have totally different perspectives. And I think that's really important to understand if you're just like a normie like me, where you just want to be a good weight, good health, a good baseline, and sustain it. And I was able to look at different people, see what they say, and glean some of their knowledge and their beliefs, admittingly that even during that, some of them have changed some of their opinions. But at the end of the day, the weight came off, and I've been able to keep it off imperfectly. Didn't have anything that, made a lot of mistakes. But at the end of the day, I still got there. And that's what people need to understand, is that if it takes you years, again, it took me 3 years to get to the weight that I wanted because I had different things that were going on, and we're figuring it out. And I want to take people what took me years into months. But you have to kind of find what works for you. And I think that you have to just accept, okay, this is the few people, or this is the group of people. If you're going to YouTube for answers and you're looking for, let's see, experts, doctors, trainers, influencers, whatever, you have to just take the action and say, you know what? Let me try what they say. Let me take that one little nugget that they drop, because that's how I look at it. Is when you take in the information and you watch some of these people, they drop golden nuggets, and you're like, I'll take that. Let's try that. And if it works for you, great. Now put that into your life if that works for you. Because again, it's like dieting. I really believe that there's a lot of different ways to lose weight, and a lot of things that today I think people struggle with the fact there's too many options, too many ways to do things. And so you get kind of in this overwhelm of I don't know what to do, so I just do nothing and I stay put and I just do more information without taking the action and without working on the mindset. Yeah, my dad had sleep apnea. I believe that definitely is a challenge. Um, but trying to prioritizing the sleep as best as possible is important, but I'm sure that's definitely a challenge. But I think people need to understand that you have to just find what's best for you. And that's okay. Some people want to do, like, I have a friend, I lost 57 pounds. He lost over 100 pounds and he pretty much did vegan. Now, I'm not a proponent of that, but he got results too. So he took a completely different path than I did. And he also lost the weight. So, regardless of what we could say, okay, well, what's again trade offs? What are the long term consequences of how you're living your life? The weight loss plan that you're running on, I don't know. Everyone has different opinions on it. But just from a look standpoint, again, internally, there could be crazy things going on. Just like the first question about, taking a, GLP-1. Yeah, you might lose the weight and there might be some benefits, but the question is, what's that doing internally long term? And I think that there's going to be a lot of mistakes no matter who you listen to, and you have to accept the fact that you just have to kind of think about trade-offs. What are some potential long-term consequences of the path that you're taking, and pivot from that if it's not working for you. But I just don't think that um, I think there's so many ways to get the weight off. Now, when it comes to keeping it off, that's a complete life transformation that you have to get to by the time you get there. And you have to pivot into making sure as you're going through the process that you're ready when you're about to pivot to be able to stabilize and actually keep it off long term. And so for me, one of the things that helps is just eating pretty much the same thing, um, 90% of the time. That way, for me, it allows room if I want to go to psychopath and have a binge day, you know. And it's funny because the two things that really trip me up personally is ice cream and pizza. Those two things taste wonderful. Wonderful. And when I talk about pizza, I'm talking I'll eat the whole large. Papa John's, I'll eat all of it in one sitting. And I still do. I haven't had it in a while, but I gave up pizza and ice cream for about 4 months. That did it because I noticed that, and also with carbs, which is kind of unique, is I always noticed when I had things like pizza or ice cream, when it came to carbs, I would feel really hungry the next day. And when I stopped doing that, I didn't have that feeling nearly as much. And so I think there's certain foods and certain ways to live that makes it easier. Again, cutting out the sugar, to me, that was a massive lever because it like changed how I felt about things. It changed how I viewed food once you get over the hump. Let's see what else here. Mm. What other questions? If someone were to say, what would you recommend the first thing that I do? I would say go walk every day. Decide that, because the way I see it is you kind of, if you gamify the whole process, it just makes it a lot more fun. And if you look at it that way, because again, there has to be a certain level, in my opinion, especially for me at, almost 41. I can't live and think the way I did when I was 20. I can't go to buffets and act like that's not going to affect me. Now, I could do it once. At this point, I could do it, but it would be like a rare thing. And I still struggle with binging sometimes, but I think it's important to realize as you get older, like your body changes and the things you used to get away with, it's going to catch up with you and you're going to have to scale back a little bit. The concept of just eat less, that's so true. It's so true. Um, but anyway, the way I look at it is I look at weight loss and the whole process as using hacks. What are some daily hacks that I can sink my teeth into and say, okay, these are the things that I'm going to be consistent with? So, for instance, daily hacks, non negotiable for me. I walk 10,000 steps minimum per day. I'm up at 5 a.m. every day. I think in the last 2 years or so, I can count on two hands that I didn't wake up at 5 a.m. And I use this, I don't know if you guys have ever heard of Early Bird, but it's this drink mixture and it wakes you up and it gets you hydrated, but it's using whatever you need to do. Now I made sure to focus on sleep, but as far as getting up, right now I get up at 5 because I got to get the steps in. For instance, it's like 111 or 112 right now. Well, by 9 a.m. it's 100 degrees. So I got to get it in early. So it just depends on where you live. If you live up north in the wintertime, there's most places other than, let's say, I don't know, Southern California, probably. Most places in the United States, you're not going to have perfect weather year round, and you don't have it year round there. I lived there most of my life, and I was just there for 10 years. Then I moved a year and a half ago. And, there's different challenges in getting it in, but getting the steps every day, to me, if I'm going to binge or I'm going to eat whatever I want, I know that I got my steps in. I got 10,000 steps. And of course, I average about 14,000 a day, pretty much. But I get them done in the morning. And this is just what I do. Everyone does different things, but this is just what's helped me. It's one thing to go crazy and go on a binge while you sat around all day. It's another thing to go crazy and have a binge, but you had 10,000 steps for the day. I'm not saying that there's a whole lot of maybe movement in just that alone, but little changes, little actions over a long period of time is what has done it for me over a long period of time. So one example is that I remember very distinctly, I think I was already at my goal, my weight goal, but I got a Papa John's pizza. And of course I'm going to eat the whole thing, one sitting. But I didn't eat anything that day. And all I had was a pizza at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. That was all I had for the day. So even though I had the pizza, I didn't have cookies. I didn't have other meals during the day. And I'm not saying that's what you need to do. I'm saying you have to find what works for your personality and where you're at and to deal with it in that way. So I know, again, back to the food, if I can eat a very specific group of foods 90% of the time, for instance, at lunch, pretty much lunch every time. I don't eat breakfast for the most part. Well, sometimes I do, but I didn't while I was losing weight. Intermittent fasting, another lever. So walking 10,000 steps, non-negotiable. And then, see, am I still on? No, it's freezing. See here. Can you hear it? Looks like it might have frozen. You see here. Shows that it's frozen here. So let me see. See, we still going? Let me see here. Let's see here. Shows that it's live, but let me see. Let's see what the hiccup is. Oh, there we go. There we go. Okay. Sorry about that. It froze for a second. Weird. Yeah, we're just learning this. Yeah. I think the warm up is good. Now, ever since 2020, another thing to note is that I lost all the weight without the gym. I didn't lift any weights whatsoever. I did body weight stuff. I did add some bands because I wanted to work the back a little bit, but that was much, much later. And what people need to understand is you don't need a gym. You do need to build muscle. That's true. But you don't, the fact that I was able to lose 57 pounds and never utilize the gym or weights in that sense proves that it can be done. Because when 2020 happened, I'm kind of there was no way I was going to wear a mask while I'm working out. That's absolute lunacy. So I'm like, well, plus gyms got shut down. You had all that situation happen, and it's like, well, I need to work on my weight because it was out of control. And okay, let's do it outside. So I did everything at a park, which is kind of funny. But the fact is, it can be done. You don't need all that stuff. Now, I encourage it if you have access to it, sure. But as far as the weight loss goes, and again, we're always wanting this perfect solution, this perfect thing, and unless we get that, we're not going to move forward, and that's not going to help you long term. You're going to have to just do your best and learn as you go in certain ways. Again, all you have to do is go to YouTube and go to see what experts say, and they're all going to have different answers. And to me, that just shows they don't even agree. They don't even know what's going on. They know more than I do. And that's why I take some advice from them and I look at that. But I notice when they change their opinion fully on something, but they're allowed to do that, of course, and they learn new things and they make adjustments. And that's why I think you got to realize this is kind of a daily thing. This is a game. You're just learning as you go. But so for me personally, the hacks that I consider is I walk 10,000 steps per day. And that is priority, non-negotiable. I'm at 737 days straight of at least 10,000 steps per day. Sleep is also a hack because it has to do with your hormones. You want to make sure that you're getting the rest you need. That's really important. I think that's something that's very neglected, and I know sleep can be difficult for some people, and you need to make sure to do the best you can. I do actual training 4 days a week. So some people will say 3 days a week is fine. I do it 4 days, and I use a gym right now. But the only things that I'm using, even though I have access to the gym, all the stuff I've done, if I didn't have it, I could keep it going. But because I do have access and I use the the rope pull down for triceps, and then I do the lat pull down because when I was doing pull-ups, I was getting tennis elbow. So I adjusted to that. But I still use bands. I don't use machines. I don't use any of the other weights. But as far as during my whole weight loss time, I just did it at a park. So, because to me, we just are looking for too much perfection, too much. It has to be a certain way. I have to feel a certain way about it and all of that. It's like, look, you just have to move forward and adjust as you go. I think that's the important thing. So 3 to 4. So I do 4 days a week. I walk 7 days a week. I train 4 days a week. So 2 days I like to do Monday, Tuesday, and Friday, Saturday, ideally. But I have at least 1 day of rest in between, sometimes 2. But I did that pretty consistently. So 10,000 steps per day. And the consistent 10,000 steps per day, that was on the tail end of my weight loss as far as me actually counting streaks. Now, I walked, but I didn't really make the extreme effort until almost 2 years ago. And I had a couple months of steps, but they weren't, 10,000 in a row. And I wanted to say, you know what? This is the one thing that I'm going to make a priority no matter what. 10,000 steps per day, because I want to be the greatest walker in the world. And I want to have, if I could get and figure it out, I would walk across the United States. Because not only would that make me unbelievably rare, but the learning in that and what you can because it's at least like 6 months, 7 months to do it. But you have to, have it all ready to go and probably sponsored, and, everything has to be planned out and probably meeting people. It's an interesting thing, but if I could, I would do that. So on the calorie thing, this is one thing that I will say when it comes to tracking that I think was kind of unique for me personally, but it goes with my personality. I bought I think it might have been last year. Maybe it was 2 years ago. Anyways, I bought one of those food scales. I have used it 0 times. I have it because in my course I do I talk about different tools, but not one time did I ever weigh food. Rarely when, you know, so the tracking app, I do recommend it. I think that's a good idea. I think maybe weighing your food and all that, like the extremists, I'm more of an extremist in a different way. Like I'm more strict and then I leave room for mistakes. But to keep you on track, I think that's a good idea. Are you finding that's helpful for you? But since you mentioned that, that's one thing I did not do. I didn't track calories. I don't go look at, there's a few things that I might have peaked on the, ingredients and things in that of that nature just to kind of get a baseline. But I had such a small group of food that I was pulling from that I didn't really do much. For instance, the whole idea with the protein, that's a priority. And I know that while I was losing weight, I know I was under sometimes. I know I probably didn't get enough. And so I added to it. So I started being like the crazies you see on YouTube where they add the protein powder to the Greek yogurt. It works. It's a good idea. But that was an example of me making adjustments along the way. I was still on track in the sense of I was moving forward. And then I realized, okay, I'm going to need to do some things here. So for instance, here's one thing too. You have to be ready for the crash outs. You have to be ready for when you wear down and the motivation is no longer there. What are you going to do? And for instance, at about the year mark, I was starting to wig out a little bit. And a couple of times I made some pancakes. After the year, I had already lost the weight that we've been going for a while. I was at I had it over a year and a half of keeping the weight off. But then I was starting to Jones a little bit. I'm thinking, I got to add some food because it gets annoying to, even though it works for me in some ways, it's a huge sacrifice. And so I'm like, well, because when you're at that weight, when you're at the place you want to be, you have to sustain it and you have to find a way to manage it and also live your life and not make it an obsession. Like I'll give you an example. The reason I just do the working out 4 days a week, and some people do 3, and I think that's great too, because I don't want to be there. I don't care to spend time at the gym. And nowadays, because I did, because I was working out outside and I use the gym where I'm at now. Again, I don't, other than those 2 different things, I still do push-ups. I still do some bands. I still do, when I do squats, it's just air squats, cardio, the only thing I do is I do basically high knees with like a sprint for 30 seconds, 3 different times, because I just want to blast my lungs and that's it. And then I'm done. And then I get, and I do my steps, but the steps, I don't look at it as, it's not intense. It's just, I look at it as movement. And I don't really even I look at it as like a maintenance thing for me, but I don't look at it as, hey, this is how I'm losing weight, even though weight loss is effective. And I think it's helped with getting some of the aesthetic look, I guess, that I hadn't had before. Walking is good. There's a lot of cool benefits to that, but it goes so much further than weight loss. But that's something that I know I can do and I can get a win out of it. And it's like a confidence builder for me. Let's see what else. What other questions do we got? So weight loss hacks, 10,000 steps per day. I train 4 days a week. And I just do some simple exercises. Like for instance, on Mondays, if I do push-ups. I basically do 3 sets of 20 push-ups. I do the lat pull downs now, which If I didn't have the rope pull down, I would just do a dip off a bench because that's what I did at the park. You're still working your arms and triceps. Now I do my push-ups a little bit angled so I can get a little bit of bicep in and kind of just hit it at a different angle. So the first day, all I do is basically 3 sets of the high knees sprints, 3 sets of the push-ups, 3 sets of the tricep rope pull downs. And that's all. And I stretch. And then the next day I do, I'll do 2 ab exercises. Oh, that's another thing too. I almost didn't focus at all other than a plank, basically the plank for abs, which was kind of interesting because abs will start showing up when you get the fat off you. Once you lose the excess body fat, your abs will start appearing anyway when you get to a certain body fat percentage. So that was kind of unique, is that I kind of got some out of default, which was interesting because it wasn't even the focus whatsoever. So then the second day I'll do like the lat pull downs instead of the pull-ups because of tennis elbow. So it's just an adjustment. And then I'll just do, I like to do wide, like sumo squats. So I just do 20 air squats. Let's see, do I do it? I think I just do 2 sets of that. Not a whole lot of things. And then I'll do reverse flies with a band. And then I'll do rows with a band. And I'll do a plank with a side plank. And I'll do this thing called a dead bug, which is you pull your arms and your legs together like a bug. And I don't know if you guys have seen Dr. Berg. He's I think he's a chiropractor, but he's one of the very first people that I was following. He was a big fan of the keto diet. So I think I came across that. Dr. Ken Berry, him and his wife, they're big on that. I can't think of the guy's first name, but Baker, he's a big carnivore person. Again, there's people who are extreme on the carnivore diet, and I'm not a professional here. I'm for that. I think it's a great thing, but I just can't imagine just eating like meat and that's it. Now, right now, I don't eat vegetables for the most part, other than if I get it at Chipotle. But eggs, ground beef, that's something that I pretty much eat 90%, at least 1 meal a day with that. And then if I were to take the 2 staple meals, it would be 5 eggs, maybe 10 ounces of ground beef. And we're talking about if I was losing the weight and I'm not trying to add. I added a banana in the middle of the day, which I gave those all up, by the way, too, during my weight loss. But I'll add that because I want to add some extra calories. So that, and then Greek yogurt. In those containers, I basically can do 3 servings per container. So I do that, and then I add a little more maybe than a scoop, maybe a scoop and a half of the protein. Let's see, what do I use? I think it's Levels protein. And so when I realized, I need to probably add a little more protein, I started mixing it into the Greek yogurt. And then I add wild blueberries and some strawberries. So that's what I do. So if you were to say, okay, what is something that I can tangibly do? Greek yogurt with protein mixed in it and maybe some strawberries. It depends on, again, the berries are limited but they fit into the keto diet. So that worked for me. But it's funny because I did notice when I talk about I didn't track anything. I had I was just curious. I'm like, okay, am I getting enough protein in? And it was funny because when I did check on it, I was almost spot on. Some will say that zero point 0.8 to um, 1 gram per pound of body weight. So, for instance, I like to be between, if I were to have a window, I would allow up to 175, but I like to be in the mid to high 160s. And by the way, this is one of the craziest things for me is knocking the walls down in your beliefs and surprising yourself of what can happen. So when I used to say 160s, that's not going to work with my body type. That's just not going to work. Mid 170s is where I need to be for my body. But I dropped into the 160s, and that was really good for me. I like to be, if I could be 165, I'm 166 right now, of course, according to the scale, but somewhere between 160, preferably 163 to 168, somewhere in there. But I'll leave a window and I'll leave an opening and I'll be okay. Again, you have to have some sort of standards and a window for yourself, in my opinion, so that way you're not constantly living in this chasing. You're in a place where you're like, I'm good. Let me just, if I start creeping up towards and making some kind of going off the rails, then we dial it back a little bit. But if I could stay between 160 and 175, I'm content. I think that works for me. But I do think that tracking is helpful. So 10,000 steps a day, training, like push-ups, doing the resistance training all around, whether you're using weights or your body weight or whatever. It's actually to build muscle. That's 4 days a week. I like to do each area twice a week with at least 1 day of rest in between. And then focus on sleep, because that's really important. Making sure my diet is on point. And there's going to have to be some sacrifices to some level. Do I feel like I'm missing out? No. If I were to, for instance, if I were to just go out for fun and go to a restaurant, I don't go there thinking, okay, what's in my diet? I don't care about that. That doesn't bother me, because to me, there's something to be said about having freedom and living your life and understanding and figuring out where can you live within the realm that works for you. What works for you? Cutting everything out forever, I don't think that works. I think that that's kind of a recipe for you to really lose your mind, in a sense. And I think it's important that you focus on as much as possible when you're losing the weight. I heard someone say this. I thought that was very good. They said, if you can stay as close as possible to a sustainable lifestyle, even in your weight loss, it's just going to be easier to have it long-term work, because you're having to be a different person. You're having to change your thinking and your actions, but there's different phases of it. So obviously when you're in the weight loss phase, you're staying in a calorie deficit, and you basically ride it to the bottom. But then you get to the bottom and you're like, Now what? Because once you're starting to get there, you're going to have to start learning to pivot. You're going to have to start making plans to change again. And then once you're exactly where you want to be and within, the boundaries that you are claiming, now you got to figure out how to sustain it, because you're going to have to add calories, and that throws you off because you're so used to, especially if it took you a long time like it did me, you're so used to the habit of, pulling back. But there comes a point where now you have to start eating to sustain it. And to me, keeping it off is far more difficult than losing the weight, in my opinion. And I can see why most people can't keep it off long term, including myself. But now that I've done it for 3 years, which was unheard of for me, I now realize that for me, I cracked the code and it works for me. But everyone has to kind of figure out their own personality, what they're willing to give up, because you're going to give up something. And I think that I would rather eat a lot less, or have a lot less options for food, with the ability to make some big mistakes here and there, than to have a bunch of variety things that I got to keep track. Because the simpler you make it, the easier things become. So I like to be strict in a couple meals, and then allow myself to make some big mistakes if I need to. But that works for me. I'm not worried now because I've done this for such a long time for me, that I start to, it's become habit, and it's second nature. And getting there makes it a lot easier. So walking 4 days a week, training, get your sleep in. Intermittent fasting was another lever. I think that was something that was very good for me. Very good for me. Not only that, but it saved me money. Probably saved me $100 or so per month if you just drop one meal. You're not going to starve to death. But when I got rid of breakfast, not only did I save the money, I mean, people are struggling financially. Take advantage of it. Take advantage and just get rid of a meal. There's an easy 500, 800 calories just right there. And I think that's another lever, is intermittent fasting. So that's another one that I would recommend. Careful of the negativity, and learn some self-awareness. Because if you're, I'm an emotional eater. I'm a binge person. I struggle with that. So I have to be mindful to that, and be able to understand what's going on, and to be able to pivot and realize what I'm getting into. And that just takes time. You kind of have to figure it out. But man, if you can get to the place where you're able to recognize the path you're going down, and then you can throw a stop sign in front of it, and you're like, okay, hold up. Regardless of how I'm feeling, what are the consequences if I eat this? And I'm just saying, for your own internal self, this isn't something you do forever, but you're having to recognize these things if you want the results. And I think if you can get that self-awareness, man, that's going to help you so much. So another thing that I did was I gave up the sugar, because I was basically keto diet. So that automatically happened, and that really was helpful. So any other questions? Let's see here. Let's see here. Any other questions? If you really want to gain some confidence, stop looking at other people. Take some inspiration. And the only thing that I'm really looking for when it comes to my own stuff is I want people to see my stuff, see my story, see my journey, and say, you know what? If this guy can do it, sorry, don't shake that. If this guy can do it, maybe I can do it. That's the message for me. Is it took me a long time. I know that I know that I know that I can take what took me years and help people do it in months because I actually have done it and I've tracked it for 5 years, my entire journey. And there's another one. So what's another lever you can pull? What's another hack? I recommend you start tracking and graph it. So you can put, for instance, I weigh in on Mondays. Some people say, hey, weigh in every day. I don't agree with that. I think that you have to live your life. You need to make it a priority, but also you need to live your life and find a way to make this a priority, but also not completely be obsessed with it. Now, you're going to have to put in the time and some energy and some mental effort to figure it out. But then once you're on track, now you can just kind of live your life, make the adjustments, make the sacrifices that you want that works for you, and keep it moving. Any other questions? Let's see here. Okay, we've been going a little over an hour. Any other questions before I sign off here? I just think that the walking, man, the walking has literally changed my life because it's not really even about the weight loss, other than it gives me those tiny wins that gives me confidence knowing I actually accomplished something. And, the last 6 years have been very challenging in our world. And to be able to have some wins that you can stack, I think it's very, very helpful. And it's important to be able to really have something that you can be proud of and say, hey, you know what? I'm doing it. I'm winning. And it has nothing to do with other people. It has nothing to do with anybody other than me. Because I've decided how I want to live. I've decided on what works for me. And I'm just it's just really neat to see it from the other side. Like, it blows my mind that if people understood the feeling of what it's like to be at a good weight, especially if you've struggled with it for many years, I wish I could just transfer that feeling to people because it's like an anchor. All I have to do is just think about the feeling that I've had in a couple moments and realize, even though it took years, it's completely worth it. All right, guys. Hope this was helpful for you. I hope you got something valuable. Just take something that you felt helpful, put it into practice, do it day in, day out. Well, don't do it day in, day out, but you're going to have to change some of the priorities because if what you're doing isn't working, then you need to pivot at some level. So, anyways, I'll be back soon. Hopefully, this was helpful for you guys. We'll catch you next time.